really bring in the global dimensions to the local and sort of weave it together in terms of understanding the past. So we'll have Andrew, in a sense, plotting out his sort of rethink on the city of Hartford, if you will. Andrew.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you all for coming on the eve of Thanksgiving to hear talk about this. This is an outgrowth of a historical introduction to Hartford that Changming asked me to do now 2 years ago, something like that, a year and a half ago. And, you know, there aren't a lot of short introductions to the history of Hartford. And so I had to think about it for a long time. What I had maybe going for me is that I've taught this course 22 times, so a lot. And if I know a lot of stuff about Hartford, it's because I've read a lot of student papers about Hartford and been in this long developing dialogue about how best to understand the place that I came to in 1975 as a first-year student at Trinity College, and have spent the rest of my life trying to figure out. That may indicate that I'm not the swiftest guy, but this is a place that's very revealing about life in America. It's a good place to introduce students to American urban history, partly because it's one of a handful of places that covers the whole span of North American history. I have for a long time started classes by saying every important event, trend, development, problem, advantage in the history of the United States, or in the history of European settlement in the United States, has left its mark here. So if you want a place to look, it's not the only place to look for this sort of thing. Hartford does the job pretty well. For this volume, I wanted to try, because I've been thinking about this in the last several go-throughs, to connect Hartford more effectively to major trends of global history, and especially economic development trends. And I'm doing this partly because I'm looking for ways to engage our students in this place, which is a challenge. This is not Paris. Many of them come from bigger places to this one. And getting them to think about the texture of things is important. I'm a historian. Among the things that historians do, you know, at the center of our skill set is think about sequencing of events and think about periodization of history. And so I'm interested in transitions. I'm interested in how things change over time. And one of the things that's very clear, even from a cursory study of the region's history, is that Hartford is a place that has changed drastically, repeatedly, over the last 400 years. And this is, if I have a central insight to offer, it's that it has been radically changed 4 or 5 times. Not just in size, not just in economically what goes here, but who lives here and how they live and how society is structured. And today I'm going to argue that you can connect most of these major points of transition to important shifts in the global economy. And that Hartford's history illustrates, if not Hartford surfs on global history. It's connected to it. If you're a reader of social science globalization theory, much of it's invested in discovering where the big, hot, important centers of command and control are at any moment. Is it London? Is it Hong Kong? Is it Shanghai? Is it Bombay? If you look at Hartford, you're not going to find the history of a place that has ever been a center of global command and control. But its history is profoundly shaped by the important global developments of a series of periods. And if you want a place to enter into a kind of complex understanding of how things change and how profoundly they change in a locality, in an economy, Hartford is a good place to do this. So I want to start by looking, if I can get this function right, at the kind of thing that historians have to do when they start trying to do a history of the place. This is not the swiftest connection around. So here's something that I'd have to say is stolen from Jack Doherty, who started doing this 10 years or so ago. And these are a series of maps that an undergraduate who graduated 2 years ago, Nick Bacon and I did for this book. And it's a series of representations of regional population. So you can see the evolving shape of the region. Here is each of these, in this pattern, each of those dots stands for 50 people. So Hartford at 1850, or at 1800 rather, I wish I had a better frame on this, barely stands out as an urban place at all in the context of the Connecticut Valley. At 1800, the United States is an overpoweringly rural world. It's a new country. The 1790 census estimates that 3% of the population is urban. And that's very, very, very low. So it's dispersed. It's hard to describe any place around here as urban. And this is Hartford almost 200 years into its history. 1870, 7 years later. Something big has happened. Here's 1910. Something bigger has happened. If you know about 19th century industrial technology, it's built around steam power. And the logic of 19th century urbanization is a logic of compression and density. And so the urbanization of the 19th century produces this, a very densely packed city by the early 20th century. And the only other comparable zone is another factory town. This is New Britain, in the region. The general context is of population growth. So here's 1950. So in 1920, the population ratio is there are 3 Hartford residents for every resident of a town that touches Hartford. By 1950, it's 1.5 Hartford residents to every suburban resident of the towns touching Hartford. And Hartford has reached its peak population. So you can begin to see this band filling in pretty quickly. Here's 1970. This is 1990. Here's 2000. So, yeah.
Oh, the top right corner, what town is that?
The top right corner,
Yes.
this
Yes.
is Enfield.
Enfield.
Yeah. And so Enfield develops in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s as a significant satellite residential community. There's a mill town of fairly large size there preceding that, but it becomes suburban after World War II. So any history of the region starts with rural America and ends with this, right? With a very diffused, substantial urbanized population. The case for thinking of Hartford as this, rather than this, is made by these numbers, right? So in thinking about how to understand this, the evolution of these population patterns and what they signify, you've got to look beyond just how many people they are and begin to ask who they are. And